All right, moving on. President William Ruto has revealed that Kenya's gross domestic public debt is in the region of 8.8 trillion shillings to 9 trillion shillings, a number that is lower than the data available from the National Treasury, which puts the figure at 9.39 trillion shillings. President, who was speaking with journalists in State House, Nairobi, was put to task over the role of the International Monetary Fund in the new taxes in the country. Now, to which he explained that the International Monetary Fund wanted Kenya to borrow more funds, which he declined.
The International Monetary Fund does not run the government of Kenya. I do. IMF does not make decisions for the government of Kenya. I do. IMF are our partners. They work with us on our priorities. They work with us on our proposals. They support us where they can. They give us advice where they can, but ultimately, we make the decisions ourselves. And it is not up to IMF to see how to sort out the 680 billion that we have on the road sector. It is not up to any other person. It is up to us. When I get out of this office and go to this village and that constituency and that ward, it is not the IMF that is asked about roads. It is the government of Kenya that I run. So I think there is always this thinking that external factors dictate to us. I think you know me better. Mm-hmm. I can stand up to any pressure from any corner. Mm-hmm. I make the right decisions for our country.
All right, I make the right decisions for our country. Now, that is the inroad to our conversation this afternoon. Something else that happened is that Kenya's credit rating was downgraded not long ago by the Moodys. That is the Moodys based on a credit risk. Now, one of the things that the Moodys report indicated is that the fact that Kenya is currently at high risk of default. To help me with that conversation this afternoon, I'm joined by Marshall Nyangor, who is an economist at Zimele. Marshall, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jimmy, for having me. Asante.
All right, first things first. What does this downgrade mean for Kenya?
I think we need to, first of all, understand really where Moodys come into play in the whole this scenario. We need to understand that normally Kenya can borrow either domestically to finance its budget deficit, either domestically or internationally. And what has been happening for a while, I think 2014, when we issued the first Eurobond, Kenya has been getting a lot of interest internationally to borrow. And when you have that kind of exposure, you need those international rating agencies like Fitch and Moodys, for example, who now advise investors on the risk level of the debt that you issue, debt instruments. So I agree with you, and I think it's true. Moodys downgrading Kenyan financial rating does not really portray a good picture for Kenya, because you remember, Kenya still need to go internationally to borrow. Yeah. So if you have been downgraded, it means that you are now riskier, liquidity risk and all other forms of risks. So that means, therefore, that the investors will want a higher premium. It will cost you more to borrow now internationally as compared to before that downgrading.
All right, and I'm sure this is something that maybe you also do as an economist in terms of just looking at the suitability of an investment. Now, one of the things that this does then for Kenya is that it makes it hard for us to be able to get funding from the global market.
Sure.
In terms of what does Moodys look at in terms of consideration to be able to grade a country or an institution at whatever grade they give them?
Well, in terms of what Moodys looks at, and not just Moodys, but all the other rating agencies, yeah. It's just really your ability to repay the debt. Because remember, you are going to borrow, and remember, Kenya is just one player in the global or internationally, and you've noted that previously some governments have defaulted in some of these debts. Yeah. So Kenya is not very, very unique. So Moodys is trying to protect the investors that might be interested in borrowing this, and they're telling them the risk of Kenya has increased to this level. Mm-hmm. So in this particular downgrade, I think they have explained that they were looking at Kenya's own ability to borrow domestically, because if you're not able to borrow domestically, then even internationally it will be an issue. And there's a very funny story about that, because in the financial year 2022-2023, that we are just almost closing it, so that we're going to start 2023-2024.
Yeah.
The planned domestic borrowing was around 850 billion thereabout. And by May, only half of that has been achieved. In other words, in the last few months, Kenya has been issuing instruments, but investors have been shying away from them. The result of that is what we have been seeing in the financial market, where the bonds are now attracting a very, very high interest rate, a coupon of over 14%. A 3-year bond was just issued last week, and 14%. It has never been seen before. That kind of a thing. So it's telling you that the local investors, or rather the investors, are not interested in the long-term government borrowing. Instead, they're going for short-term end. And that is what Moodys is looking at, saying that even domestically, you're not able to raise debts. How are we going to pay the international debts? So that's really the whole point about the rating.
All right, Marshall, investors in the global north are very sentimental when it comes to such ratings. Now, when you look at this rating particularly, in terms of attracting FDIs into Kenya, how hard then does that become? Because this is a report that investors in the global north are going to be looking at, and are going to be looking at some of the reasons that have been listed in this report, in this rating.
I agree with you. It's going to be a little bit more difficult in terms of basically dimming the Kenyan chances of attracting the foreign direct investment, especially now because of the cost of doing business. When the interest rates are high, it means that the cost of doing business is also very, very high. But the more concerning aspect for me in particular is the fact that at the same time this downgrading has been happening, Treasury had actually issued a request for expression of interest from international financial institution to arrange for a new Eurobond, probably I think targeting maybe to finance the maturity that should be there in 2024, I think June 2024, the 10-year Eurobond. So the Treasury might be looking up for $2 billion to finance this maturity, and that the Treasury want that to be another Eurobond issue. So the question then is, if your credits have been downgraded the way it is, all the investors that will want to participate in that issue, they'll want a higher premium. It means that the cost of getting that Eurobond will be far much higher than even what is maturing today. So it really affects Kenya in all aspects. One of the one we already said, attracting the foreign direct investment. Another side is borrowing internationally again. And I think there are many other issues we can discuss about that, the whole scenario, because again, there is also an aspect of the Fed rate that has been increasing gradually, which, the whole point is not really the Kenyans' fault. Other plays have been happening in the global economy that have put us in this situation.
All right, Marshall, in your assessment, and of course we've had the president saying that under his watch, Kenya is not going to default. Do you feel this is a true depiction of the current situation in Kenya?
I think earlier on you talked about the role of IMF, and I think even the president talked about IMF, and President cleverly defended Kenya, saying that IMF doesn't run the government doesn't do ABCD. When you ask me that question, you need to understand that Kenya is still under IMF program. And I think I agree with the investors and other economists and analysts who say that the increment in taxation everywhere, especially the 8% in the fuel, could be as a result of the IMF advice. I could agree with that. And how that comes into this whole question you're asking about possibility of default. When you are under IMF program or arrangement, they kind of try to help you to restructure your economy, but at the same time, they come as a guarantee. They tell you that in case everything goes bad, we might come in to help you to avoid default situation. So as long as Kenya continue working under IMF program, it's very, very unlikely that a situation of default will occur. As much as we are seeing all this that have been happening, but I think IMF has been very, very supportive. Even the last 2-3 years, almost putting a credit guaranteed in some of the issues that the government do, and so on and so forth. So I don't see the possibility of default unless there's a departure between Kenya and the IMF. All
right, Marshall, let's talk about the knock-on effect of this rating. Of course, it makes it makes it much harder for government to be able to access credit at the global market. What then does that mean? What effect does that have on the domestic market?
Well, I think it's, first of all, we understand is the liquidity crunch. I think we even saw it sometime when we had delays in this disbursing monies to the counties and even the payment of the government employees. That knock-on effect, it really affect the economy as a whole. But overall, if that continues for a long term, it means that Kenya will have to find a new ways of borrowing from its own development partners, whether it's World Bank or the IMF we are talking about. And if that can't happen, then I think government will be forced to cut on the expenditure. And if we haven't seen that already. We have seen a big cut on the development expenditure. And I think at some point, even the recurrent expenditure might get affected now.
All right, in 10 seconds, Marshall, I understand we're running out of time. What is the way forward? Where do we go from here?
I believe that the government has to continue with those austerity measures that are already in place. And I believe as much as they are very, very painful, the taxes that we are seeing currently are very, very painful, we have to accept that we have to increase more domestic borrowing, rather domestic revenue collection through taxes to repay some of these taxes. Sorry, some of these loans that are maturing. Sorry very much. Sorry, Jim, I think the time...
No, it's
but I think it was a very, very wonderful conversation, something that we can have if we have more time.
All right. Thank you so much, Marshall, for making time for us. And of course, thank you to our viewers for making time to join us this afternoon. That's how we wrap up this edition of Business Today. Mbiu ya KTN is up next.